Hello again, everyone. I'd like to share my thoughts with you as I analyze Psalm 19 based on our readings and the video. First of all, the way I principally see Psalm 19 is a psalm of divine instruction and a psalm that highlights, that really emphasizes what will happen in the life of a person who follows the divine instruction. That divine instruction is seen in verses 7 through 9, the importance of that divine instruction. And then what happens is present in verses 11 through 13 of one who receives and who takes that divine instruction to heart. And it's presented in beautiful imagery with the use of the sun and the bridegroom and stretching from one end of the horizon or one end of the universe to the other. So it's really presented in beautiful imagery. But we can't get away from the fact that this psalm is about divine instruction and then what happens to a human who listens to that divine instruction. Therefore, I'd like to get a little bit more into the heart of the psalm, and as we read, Schaeffer divides this psalm into four movements. We have space and time in verses 1 through 4a, the sun in verses 4b to 6. We have the law in verses 7 through 10, and we have an examination of conscience in the final request in 11 through 14. While I can read this and clearly see that, sometimes I'm not so sure, and I don't want to disagree with Schaeffer, but I just say that there's probably another way to look at that. And the reason I say that this maybe isn't in four parts or four movements, as Schaeffer says, maybe this is just two parts. Maybe this is verse 1 through 6, which is focusing on a song to the sun. And maybe this is verse 7, a second part in verse 7 through 14, which is a mediation on wisdom. And I'm not the one who came up with this. I wish I could claim myself as the source. But that's exactly what Alter writes about on page 62 of his book. So maybe this is just two different psalms, two different songs of praise that were cut and pasted and redacted by the psalmist. And ultimately, I don't think we're ever going to know. But regardless of whether we see this as a four-movement psalm, or as a two-movement psalm with two different pieces, we can't get away from the fact that the most important part of this psalm is present in verses 7 through 9, because that's when we learn about the Torah, the law. And we have 6 beautiful synonyms that describe what the law is. And I want to read those. The law is perfect, sure, right, clear, pure, and true. And what does that law do when it becomes lived, embodied in someone? Well, it becomes something that's more desired than gold and sweeter than honey. So we really hear the power and the importance of this law in those verses 7 through 9. It can't be missed. We can't forget that that is the tipping point, the turning point, as Dr. Simkovich likes to use in this psalm. I'd also like to make some allusions to some of the parallelisms I found in this. The parallelisms include day to day and night to night. That's found in verse 2, so that shows the all-encompassing nature of the Lord's instruction, this Torah. And we have this idea that no speech, no word, or no voice is present in verse 3, and then yet the voice goes throughout all the earth in verse 4. So you have this idea of silence and then noise, so a parallel, and that nothing can suppress the Lord and the Lord's Torah. And I'd also like to make another note on a different piece here, and that's what I see in verse 14. This psalm of praise, in verse 14 we see that we know what it's about. This is a song that the psalmist himself wants to be transformed. So we have the psalmist's own personal view and personal um, heart as if it's present there. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you. So the psalmist themselves completes a psalm. That's really beautiful. We don't see that in many psalms, and it's something I think that's worth noting. A couple questions. This imagery of the sun, is that something from Egyptian culture and polytheism, and its possible allusion to worship of different gods, or is this a polytheistic principle surpassed or put on top of, um, in embedded into monotheism, where one God is now in charge and one God is now powerful and one God is now giving the law and the Torah that's to be meditated on. One last question I want to ask, and that's this is a psalm attributed to David. And of course, we know David is powerful, but then also committed many sins, right? He fell in love with Bathsheba, seduced her, and then killed her husband, or had her husband, Uriah the Hittite, killed in the front lines of battle. So is this a psalm of David in possible great remorse for what he's done? And maybe we see that in verse 13 as he says, then I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression. That is, if David follows the law of the Lord. So is this a psalm when David's in great remorse and he wants to be forgiven for all the terrible things he's done, i.e., having Uriah killed on the front lines of battle? We might not know, but it's definitely worth investigating. Okay, thank you very much.